Hello everyone, and welcome to another reading from a chapter in Draco Dormians. And like all of these particular videos this month, all trigger warnings apply. As I've been saying, the story is going to get darker and darker as we go on, so if violence and coercion and just general all upsetting things apply to you, you're going to want to sit this fic out because it's just going to get worse as we go on. So, without further ado, let's just get right into it. Chapter 8. The Master of Malfoy Manor. He could see Voldemort standing in a room that was full of shadows, and beside a polished rosewood table sat the chess set. Draco knew this room, and the gilded cage that stood at one end of it. Voldemort picked up a green knight from the chessboard.
"The cup is now in a place where we can reach it,"
he said, and set the knight down again on the polished surface of the table.
"When the ritual is performed, I shall ascend to be the only ruler of the wizarding world. I will show to them the true nature of gods."
Lucius, who stood a little ways away, looked as if he was about to speak, when the door opened. A house elf entered, carrying a tray, which he put down on the table beside the chess set, and Draco saw that it held a decanter of brandy, which he suspected was Whim Martin, his father's favorite. Voldemort poured himself a glass of brandy.
"We must be ready when the cup is finally in my possession, Lucius."
Lucius's eyes narrowed imperceptibly.
"Yes, my lord."
Draco felt his eyes fluttering open. The dream was gone. He opened his eyes then, and the room swam into focus around him. Something had woken him up. What had it been? There came a sound of tapping once more, and he turned to the window to see that an owl was outside, demanding to be let in. Rising groggily from his place on the bed, he strode to the window and opened it, admitting a tawny owl who had a missive tied to his leg. Draco recognized immediately that it was from Hermione, as the parchment was tied with his signature green ribbon. Feeling a bit mystified, he pulled the ribbon off and unrolled the parchment and began to read. "Draco, I just wanted to write and let you know that I made it to Diagon Alley safely, and I'm doing more research on the things we discussed while at school. I know you'll say I'm mad, but I just can't sit idle. Currently, I'm staying at the Leaky Cauldron and debated for hours about whether to send you this post or try their flu network, but it costs quite a bit, and to be honest, I feel that public fireplaces are a bit dodgier. Once, Lavender told me that her mum had tried to use the flu network at a pub called Morris and Tibbs and got the wrong one. I won't repeat what her mother saw, but I'll just tell you that they were rarely shocking things. Anyway, I wanted to write to tell you more about Raisin. She keeps appearing again and again in illustration books on alchemy, often in crowded pictures behind your ancestors. But that's all I've been able to find out. On the subject of your injury, I've been having worse luck. I'm about reduced to cross-referencing injury with magical things that glow, and just seeing if I come up with anything. So far, no luck. Are you still planning on seeing a meta wizard? Are you still having those dreams? If you are, don't forget to use the pensieve. It's important that we keep documenting. They close the library at 5 o'clock, so I need to get back down there to get a few more hours of research in. But I'll see you at the wedding tomorrow. Hermione. Draco lowered the parchment down on the table next to the window and looked outside. It was good to know that Hermione had made it to Diagon Alley, and he supposed he should have felt comforted knowing that she was still putting all her efforts into looking into things. But he could also feel the desire in the letter, the desire to ask about Harry, and her tactical decision not to. Perhaps when he wrote her back, he would give her a rundown on his condition anyway. At least he would put her mind at ease, knowing that he wasn't dead or in any danger, but rather sulking about the manor like someone with a permanent rain cloud stuck to their head. As if on cue, the door to his bedroom suddenly swung open, and Harry himself came in. "Malfoy, I need to ask you." He broke off, his eyes going from the owl perched expectantly on the windowsill to Draco, still holding the parchment and identifying green ribbon in one hand. There followed several moments of very uncomfortable silence. "So, how is she doing?" Harry asked, his voice sounding tight. Draco sat down in the chair opposite his desk and looked at Harry, still half in and half out of the doorway. The stricken look was gone from his face. Now he looked as if he'd forgotten what he'd come in for. "Fine," he said. "She's in Diagon Alley at the Leaky Cauldron, if you really wanted to know. She's looking into the 4 worthy objects, making sure I document my dreams, and finding out more about my weird cousin. Life goes on, you know. Although, if it bothers you, I was just about to write her a long letter explaining the details of your sulk sessions." "I haven't been sulking," said Harry indignantly. Draco raised an eyebrow at this. "Well, then you've been doing a remarkable impression of a one-legged man at a buck-kicking contest." Harry looked as if he regretted asking his initial question, and decided to change the subject. "Did she find out anything about Rhysand?" "She appears to have the nasty habit of only following Malfoys around, which isn't very encouraging," Draco said. "That must mean she wants something from you," said Harry darkly. "What do you think it is?" "The better question is," Draco countered, "how do we get her to leave me alone?" "Maybe if you give her what she wants, she will." Draco thought back to Harry when he was in the graveyard, and the drugged look in his eyes as he stared at Rhysand. "I get the feeling that if you gave her what she really wants, you'll have worse things to worry about than Voldemort. Like, how will you ever explain to Hermione that you lost your virginity to a vampire vixen?" "Fuck off, Malfoy," said Harry, but there was no rancor in it. "Anyway, I thought you said she wasn't a vampire." "I know, but seems how I'm at a loss for another way to categorize her, vampire vixen she shall be until otherwise stated." Harry didn't smile at this, and proceeded to flop onto a chair in the corner, looking dejected. "You may be right," he said slowly, his gaze unfocused, "about what you said earlier. I have been a bit mopey lately." Draco almost fell out of his chair. "A bit mopey? You call that a bit mopey? That's like saying that, what's her name, Moaning Myrtle has got the sniffles. I'll tell you, Potter, there have been times lately when I've been tempted to go hang about with her just to have someone upbeat to talk to." "I get it," Harry interrupted. "Look, I'm sorry," he said more quietly. "I know it hasn't been pleasant for you, and that's why I came in here. I need a favor, and it's a weird one." Draco blinked. "Already this conversation has had more alarming twists than Snape doing the Roomba." He shrugged. "I'm all ears, but at least let me pay this bird before you do. I think it's starting to get antsy." He dug around in his pocket and pulled out a few sickles, giving them to the owl, who looked mildly annoyed at having been kept waiting, and flew out the window. When Draco turned back to look at Harry, he found the other boy's expression open and confiding. It was a look that was very hard to say no to, because it made you want to trust him, and to believe that whatever idea he had was the right one. "I need you to take my memories away," he said. Draco just stared at him. "You want me to what?" "You heard me," Harry said. "Planning to start life over again as somebody else?" Draco asked, his tone sarcastic. "Going to spend the rest of your life wondering where that funny-looking mark on your head came from, are you?" "Stop being hysterical," said Harry. "Anyway, I never said anything about you taking all my memories away. I just want..." His voice trailed off. Draco sat very still. On some very deep internal level, he was badly frightened by Harry's reaction to everything that had happened recently. He would never have admitted it to himself or anyone else, but he was. "I just want not to remember all of that," Harry finished. "It's such an effort, acting normal." Draco cleared his throat. "No," he said, "I won't do it." Harry sat up straighter. "Why not?" "Because I'm not trained to do memory charms. They can backfire. You might lose the wrong memories, or lose your memories altogether. Sirius would kill me, for a start. And anyway, think of how it'd look if in the middle of the party you forgot his name or something." Harry looked startled. "I see your point, but there must be something." "How about a cheering charm?" Draco asked grudgingly. Internally, it was his opinion that asking himself for a cheering charm was not unlike asking Snape for a love potion, or Filch for a pink birthday cake. It couldn't do you too much damage. Harry shrugged. "Can you do one?" "It's bloody third-year magic. Of course I can do one." "I suppose I meant, will you do one?" Draco sighed. "Yes, I will, but not right now. I don't want you going around grinning like a lunatic all afternoon." Harry grinned in a calm and unlunatic-like manner, and got to his feet. "Thanks. I'll come back before the party then. What joyous news." Harry turned. "Potter?" "What?" "Nothing."
"At least offer me a decent explanation," his mother said, in a tone that clearly indicated that she was at her wit's end. "You at least need to give me something other than Harry and I had a fight, Ronald Weasley."
"Well, that's all you're going to get, Mum," Ron said in a monotone. Through the open door of the kitchen, Ginny could see Ron as he sat quietly on the sofa. His hands were clasped and dangling between his knees. His head was bowed, his tangled hair falling to hide his expression. "I had a fight with Harry," he continued. "He won't want to see me. It'll make the whole wedding awkward. It's not fair to Sirius."
"But I received an owl from Sirius just this afternoon," Mrs. Weasley went on in a cajoling tone. "He told me how much they're looking forward to seeing us at the Manor, and how much, in particular, Harry is looking forward to seeing you."
"Sirius has to say that," Ron said woodenly.
"No, he doesn't. And if you two really did have a fight, then maybe this is your chance to patch it up. You fought before. It never lasts."
Ron didn't reply, but Ginny knew what he was thinking. This will last.
"Your absence will really mar the happiness of Sirius and Narcissa," Mrs. Weasley went on, trying a different tactic.
Ron's head snapped up at that. He stared at his mother. "You can't honestly expect me to believe that they'd care. Why would they?" he said, and his voice was so toneless that it was hardly a question. "Mum, I'm 17, a legal adult, and if I decide that I don't want to go to the wedding, then there is nothing you can say that can force me to go." And with that, he got up from the sofa and stalked out of the room, through the back door and out into the vegetable patch. A moment later, Ginny came into the living room to find her mother staring mutely after her youngest son. Ginny just looked at her silently. For the first time in her life, she felt sorry for her mother, who really had no idea what was going on with Ron. Not as sorry as she felt for Ron, of course. She didn't blame him for not wanting to attend the wedding. Not at all. Mrs. Weasley's face was a picture of dismay.
"I don't understand,"
she said, gazing anxiously out the window at her son, who had begun a violent and probably unnecessary denoming of the lettuce patch.
"Of course Harry wants to see him."
Ginny sighed. "Let me talk to him. I understand what's going on." And she left the living room without another glance at her mother and proceeded outside. He seemed to hear her approach, but didn't stop what he was doing or turn around. "I'm not going, Ginny," he said. "You have to," she said. His head went up, and he looked at her then, his eyes a furious blue. "Don't look like that," she said. "You know why." "Because of Mum and Dad?" "No, not because of Mum and Dad. Because of Harry." "Harry? Harry's the reason I want to stay away. He can't possibly want me there." "No," Ginny admitted. "But think about it for a minute, Ron. Harry is famous. Draco is famous. Sirius and Narcissa are both famous. This wedding is going to be a huge media event, and there will probably be reporters there. If you don't go, they'll have a field day with it. They'll splash it all over the gossip pages of Teen Witch Weekly, just like they did third year with that crumb business, and fourth year with the whole Harry and Cho thing. And none of that stuff was even true. And Harry will be humiliated all over again." "Don't," Ron said, and flung a garden gnome so hard that Ginny didn't think it would ever find its way back. He got to his feet and stared out at the fields beyond the burrow, still covered in fresh patches of snow. "Fine," he said after a moment. "I'll go." "I hate Malfoy," he said suddenly, his tone savage. "I hate all the Malfoys and everything they stand for. And sometimes still, I wonder if Draco is the only one besides me who remembers how things used to be. He always wanted Harry on his side, and now he's got him. I miss him, Ginny. I miss my best friend. He loved what I loved and hated what I hated, and now I don't know." "Ron," Ginny said softly, "people change." I don't change." Ron looked at her and through her. She knew he wasn't really seeing her at all. "I'll go to the wedding," he said, "for all the reasons you said, but I have a bad feeling about it." Ginny was suddenly on alert. "A bad feeling? Are you just saying that, Ron, or do you see something? Because if you do," Ron smiled bitterly, "it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what any of us does. What's coming will come, and we can't stop it." Hermione scrubbed the back of her hand wearily across her eyes. In all her years, she never thought she'd feel this way, but she was sick of the inside of the library. Probably because her research wasn't getting anywhere. Hermione had always been able to bury herself in work. The more complicated, the better. But she had never been quite as preoccupied as she was now. Thoughts of Ron and Harry crowded her mind, compounded by worry over Draco, who had looked very ill when he had come down to the train to see her off. Did Ginny notice it too? Did anyone? Did they care? She knew he was clever enough to hide things from Sirius. But what about Harry? The one person who should have known instinctively. The one person who might actually be able to get Draco to do something about it. She glanced up and around her and sighed. The library walls were paneled mahogany, very dark, and hung with paintings of famous witches and wizards. Hermione had taken a seat underneath a portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw in dark blue robes, hoping it would give her inspiration. Instead, she was haunted by the lingering feeling that Rowena looked disappointed in her. She stood up, stretched her aching muscles, and went back to the floating card catalog along the east wall. She'd already asked the bookworms to do at least 4 searches for her, and she was fairly sure they were tired of her requests. It was hard to tell, though, when dealing with worms, even extremely intelligent, slightly fuzzy ones. One slithered over along the top of the catalog and waved its pale gold antenna at her curiously. Hermione sighed again. She'd already run searches on poison, injuries, blood, glowing, silver, weaknesses, debilitation spells, and phosphorescent, and hadn't come up with anything. There didn't seem to be a potion or poison that caused blood to glow. There were potions that caused people to glow, and several cosmetic spells that promised glowing and revitalized skin. But she had a feeling that this wasn't a cosmetic spell gone horribly awry. The bookworm waved its antenna impatiently. Hermione sighed once again and gave it her last shot. "Could you search the magical armaments section for me? I want to know what weapons glow or cause glowing injuries to be inflicted." The antenna waved again, and the bookworm wriggled busily away. Hermione watched it go and stifled a yawn. She knew it could take hours for the worm to scour all the books in the weaponry section, and she really was deathly sick of being indoors. With a resolute shrug of her shoulders, she went back to her desk, retrieved her cloak, and hurried out the doors of the library into the weak winter sunshine. Diagon Alley was a hive of activity. Even though it was Christmas Eve, the streets were flooded with last-minute shoppers, and floating red and green ribbons wreathed the tall metal lanterns, and tiny enchanted golden angel statuettes trilled from the tops of Christmas trees. Hermione passed a brass culinary band energetically playing Adesti Fidelis as she rounded the corner of Petticoat Lane. The windows of the lane were devoted now to displays of beautiful winter dress robes. Hermione slowed her pace to look. She had never been terribly interested in clothes, and still wasn't. She liked to look nice, clean, and presentable, and every once in a while to wear a smart skirt or sweater. She looked at her reflection in the nearest shop window and sighed. Tangled hair, bedraggled face, nubby old sweater, and wrinkles in her tights. Ugh. Her gaze drifted upwards towards the dress robes in the window display. She loathed frothy party dresses, and anything covered in lace or beads and masses of flowers made her queasy. But these were really rather nice. Straight, clean lines and jewel colors, dark reds, greens, and blues. Feeling drawn in, Hermione squared her shoulders and pushed the shop door open, smoothing her hair down as best she could with her gloved hand. She knew she didn't look her best, but it was unlikely she'd run into anyone she knew. Inside, rose-shaded lamps threw a pinkish glow over everything. Elegant dress robes were displayed like bonbons under glass cases and hanging on walls. There were daring short dress robes, long dramatic black sheaths, and confectionery pink frocks with lace edgings. Over by the window, a short-haired brunette stood patiently while a tall witch with an iron-gray bun deftly applied pinning charms to the hem of her rose-printed frock. The bell chimed as the door shut behind Hermione, and the tall witch turned. "Hello there," she said. Her voice was cool and remote, belying her warm words. "I'm Madame Magsby. If you'll wait, I can be with you in a moment." Hermione didn't reply. She was too surprised, for the girl in the rose frock had turned around and was staring at her with a look of utter horror on her face. It was Pansy Parkinson. "Pansy," Hermione said, after a very awkward moment had passed. Pansy did not reply. Hermione looked at her in astonishment. All the blood had drained out of the other girl's face, and the bright, pretty color of her dress robes stood out in stark contrast to her papery skin. Her dark brown eyes were wide with horror, as if Hermione was some hideous ghost.
"I take it you two know each other?"
said the witch with the iron-grey bun, looking amused. "We're in the same year," Hermione said, still staring at Pansy.
"At Hogwarts?"
the witch inquired. "Yes," Hermione said, since Pansy appeared to have been stunned into silence. A strange idea was beginning to take shape in Hermione's head. But no, that was ludicrous. "I'll also be attending the Malfoy Black wedding on Saturday."
"You're going to the wedding?"
Pansy said, finding her tongue at last.
"I thought you...
after..." Then she snapped her lips shut. Color had come back into her face in a flood, and she was as pink as one of the roses on her frock.
"Of course I'm going,"
Hermione said evenly, struggling to conceal her annoyance. It wasn't entirely amazing that Pansy would know about her breakup with Harry. Surely the whole school knew that. Still, it was rude of Pansy to bring it up. Then again, when had Pansy not been rude?
"I wouldn't dream of missing Sirius's wedding."
"Well," Pansy said, her voice unnaturally shrill,
"just a word of advice. It looks a bit pathetic, showing up to the family home of a bloke who's just binned you. I wouldn't do it if I were you."
It took Hermione about 4 seconds to go absolutely rigid as she digested Pansy's truly appalling remark. When she spoke again, her voice had a rasping note, as if she were struggling to keep it even.
"What exactly is your problem with me, Pansy?" she said. "I know we don't like each other, but it seems to me that, lately, you've been even more vicious than usual."
Pansy's features thickened, her eyes hardening.
"What do you care?"
she hissed, and the seamstress who'd been fixing her robe stepped back, her eyebrows raised.
"You, with your perfect little life and your perfect boyfriend, and Ron and Draco drooling all over you as if you were something special. But you treat them like they were less than you are, and they're pure-blood wizards. You're just a mudblood,"
she yelled at Hermione, in the paroxysm of abandoned rage. Madame Magsby gave a startled little gasp, but Hermione hardly noticed.
"Pansy, has it ever occurred to you that none of those boys like you because you're horrible?" she snapped,
fed up at last. Pansy screamed aloud and seemed for a moment as if she'd throw herself at Hermione, but Madame Magsby caught at her and held her back.
Now, dear," she said, "you'll damage the material."
"You're selfish!" Pansy cried at Hermione, her eyes wet. "Dangling Potter and Draco along like you have all the time in the world to make up your mind.
You've made a laughingstock out of them. Everyone thinks you're so special and clever. Well, I see right through you."
"You want to settle this with a duel? Is that what you want?" Hermione interrupted, her voice careening upward. "I'll duel you, Pansy, and when I'm done with you, there won't be enough left of you to stuff a pumpkin pasty."
"Now really,"
Madame Magsby began, but Pansy had burst into tears, and as Hermione looked on in astonishment, she tore herself away from the seamstress, raced across the room, and flung herself into one of the dressing compartments. The door banged shut behind her, and the sound of loud crying was audible therein.
"Well,"
said Madame Magsby after a moment,
"would you like to try some robes on now?"
Hermione wanted nothing less. She wanted to go back to the leaky cauldron, get a pillow, and cry, but she was determined not to let a snob like Pansy drive her out of the nicest shop on Petticoat Lane. "I suppose I could," she said.
"Well, stand over here by the window then, and do take off that cardigan. It's frightful."
Hermione did as she was bid, and was soon swathed in layers of a peach gold chiffon, printed with tiny birds. She felt tense all over, waiting for Pansy to emerge from the dressing room. The bell at the front door of the shop sounded. Hermione craned her neck around and was rewarded with a pin in the neck. A tall, stylish-looking witch had entered the shop. She had a tight, attractive face and lacquered-looking blonde hair. Her eyes scanned the room quickly and landed on Hermione. "You're not my daughter," she said, as if Hermione had somehow affronted her personally. The door to the dressing room banged open. "Mummy!" exclaimed Pansy, and ran towards the tall witch. Mrs. Parkinson looked down at her daughter with amusement. "You cannot possibly be getting all those dress robes, Pansy." "Oh," Pansy gasped, and glanced down at the pile of clothing she'd removed from the changing room. "No, do decide quickly, darling. Daddy's waiting at Nutkin's Beauty Supply. He's just delivered a shipment, and you know how he hates to wait." I'll take this one," Pansy declared, and seized one from the pile, obviously at random. It was a hideous pale green, with frilly cuffs and collar. She tossed the rest of them over the back of the padded chair. "Does it fit?" her mother asked. "It looks a bit—" "It's fine, Mummy," Pansy said, so obviously eager to leave that even her mother noticed. "Oh, well," Mrs. Parkinson sighed. She glanced up at Madame Magsby. "Put it on our account," she declared, took the robes from her daughter, and swept regally from the shop like a boat departing from a harbor under full sail. As the door banged shut behind Pansy, Hermione had to wonder what all that was really about. Draco stood and surveyed himself in the mirror that hung on the inside of his wardrobe door. He looked good. Well, this was a given. He always looked good. Making a minute adjustment to his tie, he tilted his head and gave himself a last critical once-over. He wasn't sure what one was supposed to wear to a stag night that wasn't really a stag night. Sirius had been very clear on that point. There would be no naked witches lunging out of pastries, he'd said. Just a quiet night at the cold Christmas Inn, with friends, and some of the locals from Malfoy Park, who Sirius was hoping to become friendlier with. The Park Denizens had always had a touchy relationship with the Malfoys of the Manor, and Sirius was hoping things could be patched up. Draco knew Sirius was doing this for his benefit, and was grateful. "Quit fiddling with your tie," said a voice behind him. "You always fiddle about with it, and it always winds up looking just the same." He spun around. Harry stood just inside the doorway. He wore Kenneth Troll trousers in dark blue, and a dove-grey pullover under a long wool winter cloak. Draco recognized the clothes as ones he had suggested Harry ought to buy. Harry had no fashion sense of his own, Draco mused, but at least he could take instruction. "Helen's bloody ghost," Draco muttered. "Don't you ever knock?" Harry looked indignant. "I did knock. You were too busy admiring your own reflection to notice." "Knock twice, then. Don't just come waltzing in. What would you have done if I'd been sitting here stark naked, covering myself in tapioca pudding?" An alarmed look passed over Harry's face. "I don't know. Is that the sort of thing you're likely to do?" "I might," Draco said haughtily. "It's my room. I can do what I like in it." "Well," Harry said diplomatically, "to be honest, I'd have to say I think you were very strange. Besides, you hate tapioca. I think you're missing the point." "Oh, you had a point. I'm sorry. It must have gotten buried under all the pudding." The sound of a polite cough interrupted their dialogue. "I'm not even going to ask what this is about." It was Narcissa, peering in around the open door and looking amused. "Draco, darling, 5-minute warning. Sirius is waiting for you two downstairs." She left with a smile. Harry looked anxiously at Draco. "We'd better do it now," he said. "What?" Oh, the cheering charm. Yeah, all right. Come over here. Draco sighed and reached for his winter cloak, shrugging it on while Harry came slowly across the room towards him. You sure about this? Harry paused in front of him. Yeah, I'm sure. It's just a charm anyway. All right. Draco finished fastening the griffin-shaped brooch that held his cloak together, pushed his sleeves up, and regarded Harry for a thoughtful moment. Then he reached out and hesitantly put his forefingers to Harry's temples. Harry didn't react at all. Stay still, Draco ordered him, and thought as hard as he could of cheerful things. The more cheerful the thoughts of the spellcaster, the more effective the spell. He thought determinedly of Quidditch victories, Christmas presents, amusing jokes. The look on Seamus's face when, somewhere in Ireland, he unwrapped a belated Christmas gift and found that an anonymous benefactor had sent him a brand new shovel set. A small smile came and tugged at the corner of Draco's mouth. He bent his head and concentrated as hard as he could on sharpening his will, as strong as unbendable adamantine. Felicitous, he said. He felt the magic leave his fingertips like an exhaled breath. Harry stiffened. Draco dropped his hands and stepped back. Harry's eyes had opened wide. Wow, he said. Draco gave him a narrow look. Wow? Harry grinned. It was a happy grin, full of life and light and joy, the sort of grin no one would possibly fake. Amazing, he said. Amazing? Draco echoed. I feel like 1,000-pound weight's been lifted off me, Harry said, staring down at himself, then back up at Draco. I feel normal. Thanks, Malfoy. He looked at Draco wide-eyed. I mean it. Thanks. Sure, Draco said. A sense of vague disquiet had settled on him. Glad it worked. Worked? Harry seemed to be speechless, and possibly on the verge of dispensing hugs, flowers, bunnies, and Merlin only knew what else. We ought to go, Draco said hastily. Isn't Sirius downstairs waiting for us? Right. Harry nodded and headed for the door. He paused there, hand on the knob, and swung around to look at Draco. You've done a good thing, Malfoy, he said simply. Draco paused and stared at him, arrested in the act of putting on his gloves. Harry's eyes were full of light. He hadn't seen him like this in months. He was not sure if Harry was looking at him or through him. What is he seeing? I hope so, Draco said, and followed Harry out of the room with an unshakable sense of profound misgivings. Draco had always told her that if she'd been born a boy, she would have been just like him. Blaise suspected that this, like most things Draco had said to her, seemed true, because she wanted it to be true. Still, if Draco had been at Pansy's Christmas Eve party that year, he would, just as she had, spent 3 hours getting ready, despite not really wanting to go. Hours spent knotting small, silver flowers into her hair, selecting just the right dress robes. Green, with pale embroidery along the hem. She had perched on the sink in Pansy's bathroom, making several delicate adjustments to her cosmetic charms, and looking at herself in the mirror. Like everything else in the Parkinson home, the sink was immensely tacky, with bronze spigots in the shape of spitting dolphins. Draco had once scornfully called the Parkinsons the kind of family that bought their own furniture. This had struck Blaise as both amusing and accurate, although it said more about Draco than it did about Pansy. She wished again, with a dull sort of anxiety, that he had come. He had been invited, of course. It was the party of the season, and Draco had always loved parties. But then, that had been the old Draco, the one Blaise had grown up with.
not this new version, whom she did not know. She remembered the night in August when he had come to her house. It had been a humid summer night, the kind of night where even blinking made you sweat. When the charms had rung, she'd come reluctantly to the door, trailed by a score of tiny levitating fans, all spinning madly in a vain attempt to cool the air. Opening the door, she found Draco Malfoy on her doorstep, holding a bunch of roses with pale yellow petals, the color of new galleons, and tied with ribbon. She was speechless. How many Hogwarts girls had dreamed of this exact circumstance? Blaise had pushed her damp hair back behind her ears and stared. A number of potential witticisms spun through her head. She picked one at random. "If you're looking for Goyle's house, it's further down the road. Second after the turn." Draco looked unperturbed. "The last time I gave Goyle flowers, he ate them." "Then what are you doing here, Draco?" He smiled at her, a smile that was like a punch to the stomach, half angelic wickedness and half carnal mischief. A smile that promised unspeakable things involving silk scarves, toffee, and long, sweaty nights. "I came to give you money," he said. He held out the flowers, and she took them. Instantly the petals fell off the stems in a shower of gold. When they hit the floor, they turned into galleons, which rolled around her feet. Blaise held the denuded flower stems delicately between her fingers and was again at a loss for words. "I have a proposition for you," Draco continued. "Can I come in?" She stood aside to let him pass into the foyer, and he brushed by her as he went, unnecessarily. Once inside, he smiled wolfishly and looked down at his shirt, gone half-transparent with sweat. Blaise blessed the hot evening, but said nothing. "It's a little warm in here," he observed. "We can't afford the cooling charms," she said bluntly. "Well," said Draco, his mouth curled into a cat smile, "that shouldn't be a problem for you from now on." He had seemed very much himself that night, provoking her and enjoying it. They had gossiped wickedly about the other Slytherins, mocked the Gryffindors, and sealed their bargain with a kiss in her front garden, among the dead rose bushes. She had stored it away as an important memory. Kisses from Draco Malfoy did not come along every day. In fact, in no part of their agreement was it stipulated that he had to kiss her at all. He did anyway. He was cooperative, if not overly enthusiastic. She grew to know the lines and curves of his body, memorized the pale skin flaws in a few places by its scars. One under his eye, like a crescent moon, the jagged bolt along his left palm, the slightly silvery sheen along his forearm, as if something had been burned there. She knew the graceful planes of his collarbones, his temples where the feathery hair drifted, the vulnerable spots on the insides of his wrists. She knew how the pulse in his throat beat when he kissed her, and that when his eyelashes fluttered shut, it meant he liked whatever she was doing to him. Sometimes, while she was doing it, he would put his hand over his face, fingers splayed to cover his eyes, and then she would stop and say, "Look at me, Draco." And he would take his hand away and sit up, and that would be the end of that, usually. It bewildered her, because his body seemed to like her just fine, reacted instantly when she put her hands on him. It was his mind that was always elsewhere, and it was around this time that she began to really notice the difference in him. He had changed. He was still arrogant, and he always had been, still charming and quick-witted and beautifully malicious, but that malice had lost some of its bite and edge. His wit was less brittle. He was less a glass dagger and more a silver knife.
It was another few weeks before she was able to tie this change in him to its cause. In October, Draco had been given detention by Flitwick for casting an illicit Vestitatum Transperitus charm on Neville Longbottom during class. Everyone had seen a great deal more of Longbottom than was necessary. Draco had been given a week's detention and assigned to cleaning the blackboards in the classroom during dinner hour. She had thought that it would be a good idea for her to sneak him some food, the act of a concerned girlfriend. It would assist their deception, or so she told herself, as she wrapped some sandwiches in a napkin and headed upstairs to the second-floor classroom where charms was held. She never knew what made her pause and glance through the grilled window set in the door before she went in. Perhaps simply her knowledge that Draco did not appreciate surprises in general, and surprises from her in particular. But it was Blaise who was surprised. Draco was in the classroom, and he was indeed cleaning one of the blackboards, in a bored, methodical manner, standing well away, as if he did not want to get chalk dust on his clothes. But he was not alone. Hermione Granger was sitting on one of the desks behind him, talking, her face animated and lively. It was bizarre. Blaise didn't remember Flitwick giving Granger detention as well. When Draco turned to Hermione and smiled, Blaise's knees nearly buckled. It was a smile without any edge of malice or cruelty or secret amusement. She would have not thought Draco Malfoy had a smile like that in him. Blaise tore herself away after a few more minutes of silent staring and crept, shattered, back to the Slytherin dorms. After that, she had begun watching him more closely, and a terrible, perverse curiosity seized her. In her obsession to understand what was going on, Blaise began watching both Draco and Hermione in public. She saw how he looked at her, and even how he looked at that repellent Weasley boy's little sister, and she realized that this was much more than she had imagined. It was a gigantic Gryffindor conspiracy. As if it wasn't enough that they had to win the House Cup 6 years running, they had somehow conspired to steal Draco Malfoy away from his house. Draco, the best of all of them, the brightest and the most beautiful, who gave Slytherin something to be proud of, even though they were always losing the bloody Quidditch Cup. It was hateful. It was beyond bearing. And curled on her bed alone at night, she realized it was more than the disgrace to the house, more than her terror of what would happen to Draco when the other Slytherins found out, more than outraged Death Eater loyalty. It was the gentleness that had come to Draco in these past months, and a dulling of his cutting edge. It was the faint distance behind his eyes and the cruelty that had gone from his smile and the blade had gone from his voice. He loved them. She lost her faith in him and in everything that had ever been important. The foundations of her beliefs crumbled around her and blew away like dust. Blaise half closed her eyes, remembering, but her revere did not last. Someone was banging on the bathroom door and yelling. She stood up straight, tucked her hair behind her ears, and yanked the door open. Millicent Bulstrode, clutching at an empty bottle of Archland wine, collapsed through the door.
Blaise,
She moaned, rolling over on the cold marble floor.
I think I'm gonna be sick.
Blaise thinned her glossed lips into a cool sneer. "Go ahead, Millicent," she said. "It could only improve the decor in this ghastly bathroom." And with that, she stepped over the other girl and went out to rejoin the other Slytherins and the party. The sun had well and truly set by the time they reached the cold Christmas Inn. Sirius watched the night settle through the diamond-paned windows from his place at the bar next to Lupin, and felt that all was well with the world. "Try some elm wine," Lupin said, and pushed a glass towards him, which was filled with a pale grey liquid that shimmered like mother of pearl, and smelled vaguely of socks.
Romanian wizards swear by it.
I bet they do, said Sirius with deep suspicion. I bet they say, what the bloody hell is this stuff?
True, said Lupin, only they say it in Romanian.
He grinned, and his grey eyes lit up.
Come on, you have to try it. The mayor bought a whole bottle of it in your honor.
Sirius groaned to himself. This particular gathering was something of a political move, along with a social one. He'd invited both the mayor of the town of Malfoy Park and the bailiff as well, since the township had rarely gotten along well with the manor. He was hoping that inviting them to the party would be a step in the right direction. He waved down to the bar at the mayor now. Both he and the bailiff were tall, spare, grey-faced men, and reached out for the glass of elm wine.
Blech,
he said under his breath as he drank it, and set the glass down. Lupin chuckled.
Better you than me.
I thought the Romanian wizards swear by this stuff.
They do,
Lupin said agreeably.
but then they also eat bats.
You're dead to me, said Sirius. I hope you know that. Lupin chuckled again.
You could go sit with Snape, he said. He's playing darts.
He sucks at darts. He's always sucked at darts. And he uses Expelliarmus to cheat.
Surely he doesn't do that anymore.
He's evil, said Sirius, as if that explained everything.
Hey, said Lupin, you invited him.
I invited everyone, Sirius said. I seem to know a lot of idiots, don't I? He smiled politely and waved down the bar at the mayor again. The mayor waved back. The bailiff, Mr. Stebbins, just glowered. Lupin pointed.
Well, they're not idiots.
Who? Lupin pointed again, and this time Sirius followed his gesture and saw that he was pointing at Draco and Harry, who sat apart from the rest, over by the enormous stone fireplace that occupied most of the south wall. Sirius hadn't been particularly surprised that they'd wanted to sit off on their own. They were 15 years younger than the rest of the partygoers, after all, and Harry especially had been very quiet lately. Sirius smiled. No, he said, turning to study them more closely. No, they aren't. The two boys sat side by side on one of the long, pillow-strewn couches, both looking into the fire, both silent, or apparently so. Sirius knew, however, by the intent expressions on both of their faces, and by the half-smiles that came to tug at their mouths at the same time, prompted by some unseen and unheard joke, that they were not silent at all. They were talking, inhabiting a locked world of conversation only they could hear. Lupin smiled.
Remember when we were that age, and we used to talk about everything?
Sirius nodded. I do.
I wonder what they're talking about right now.
Apple martinis, Harry said, and gestured pointedly at Draco's drink. What?
Apple martinis are green.
So what? Draco asked. You can't be suggesting that I change my signature drink because the color is wrong.
No, but I am saying that whoever told you that my ties were green was wrong. Clearly they are pink. And can I also just say that having a signature drink makes you sound like a total prat?
He waved a hand at a passing, levitating silver platter.
Apple martini, he said, and a cocktail glass appeared.
The liquid inside it was pale green.
See, he said, I told you.
Oh, shut up, Potter, Draco said, and grabbed the drink with a mournful air. To his credit, Harry did, in fact, shut up, but couldn't suppress a grin as he did so. After a moment, Draco said, How are you doing?
Fine, I guess.
He didn't look fine. In fact, he was sunk down in the armchair beside him, staring vaguely at the fire. Bright spots of color burned atop his cheekbones, and his eyes were very bright. There were 3 empty glasses on the table beside him. I don't think you should drink any more, Draco said. Maybe you should go in the back and lie down. I don't want to. I want to go outside. I need air. Harry got to his feet, using the back of the armchair to brace himself. I need a walk. Draco wondered if Sirius would notice them leaving, but he seemed to have fallen into a deep conversation with Lupin, and did not look up as they went out into the anteroom. Harry paused to pull down their cloaks from the rack, then pushed the door open. The fierce cold hit Draco so hard he was dazed for a moment, drawing his cloak on over his head hurriedly. When he emerged from it, the doorway was empty, and he ran out onto the front steps, looking around for Harry, his feet skidding on the iced-over brick. I'm here, Harry said. He was down at the bottom of the path already, his cloak pulled awkwardly about his shoulders. He seemed to be staring at something just beyond the border of hedges. Draco went slowly down the stairs and joined him. What are you looking at, Potter? It's beautiful, Harry said. Isn't it beautiful? Draco looked at him in surprise, and then back at the winter landscape. The moonlight had the clear, unblemished purity particular to very cold winter nights. It lit the surrounding snow to white fire and shivered the dark air and the tops of the distant trees. Above the trees, a mass of winter stars glittered with crystal flashes of vivid green and icy blue, while down at the bottom of the hill, Draco could hear the water of the river running underneath its shroud of ice. It was indeed a very beautiful night, although he doubted he would have thought to notice it if Harry hadn't pointed it out. He turned to look at Harry. In the darkness, he could see the other boy only as textures of light and shadow, dark hair, white skin, dark clothes. His eyes had lost some of their smoky, hollowed exhaustion and were alight behind his glasses. I want to fly, Harry said. That's nice, Draco said. We haven't got broomsticks. I know, Asama, said Harry, and sat down on the frozen ground rather suddenly. Potter, you're in no shape to do anything. I'm not drunk, Harry said very clearly. I'm just happy. Let me be happy. It's been a long time since I was. Help me up, he said suddenly, and held his hand out. Draco took it and pulled Harry back to his feet. Harry smiled at him. It was a smile filled with happiness, and yet Draco knew that it was almost entirely artificial. Come on, Harry said, turning and starting off across the frozen lawn. Draco followed him. He was getting used to this. It seemed to him that all he did these days was follow Harry various places. It was like having a toddler, a baited and oversized one. The lawn sloped down behind the cold Christmas inn, and behind one of the sheds were a line of broomsticks, obviously belonging to the keepers of the inn. Absently, Harry picked one up and tossed it to Draco. Catch. Draco caught it instinctively. Potter, what are you... But Harry had already pushed off, and his broom rocketed into the air at approximately the speed of a hurtling comet. Doing. Draco finished and sighed. Damn it, he said wearily, swung his leg over the broom, and kicked off from the ground. Immediately it felt wrong. The broom soared upward after Harry's on a near-vertical path with a soundless, slippery, gliding motion that made Draco feel as if he were about to fall off. He grabbed desperately at the broom, which succeeded only in canting him violently to the right. He held on tightly as it spun once, righted itself, and subsided into stillness. Cold air whistled in his lungs as he gasped mouthfuls of oxygen. His heart was pounding. I'm sick, he thought wildly. I shouldn't be doing this. I can't fly properly. Harry knows that. Where is he? Draco tilted his head back. The icy air stung his eyes to tears, but he could see Harry just beyond the immediately blurred field of his vision, hovering above him, a patch of darkness against the silver clouds. He looked down at him, laughing, then took off again. Later, Draco would wonder why he'd followed, but knew that the vow he had made to Hermione made it so he could do little else. He leaned forward, and the broom exploded under him, rocketing up into the sky like a meteor in reverse. In winter, the Hogwarts teams usually flew in heavy sweaters, with shin and elbow guards and high leather boots. Now, the elegant party clothes Draco was wearing provided hardly any barrier to the cold. He shivered as he soared upward, and the wind cut through the fabric of his shirt like so many tiny knives. Up ahead, he could see that Harry's cloak was snapping behind him like a flag in the wind. He fixed his eyes on that like a target and wheeled his broom forward. It banked sideways instead. Draco's hands, icy and numb with cold, clutched convulsively at the broomstick's shaft, and he remembered suddenly that some brooms carried a unique anti-theft charm. "Hell," he muttered. "Bloody, bloody hell." He threw his head back. Harry was a disappearing speck high above him. "Harry!" he shouted, and pulled back on his broom. It jerked upwards several feet, went into a lazy, slow roll, and righted itself reluctantly. "Harry!" he shouted again, leaning far forward. This turned out to be a mistake. As if shot from a cannon, the broomstick hurtled forward so swiftly that Draco had no chance to do anything other than clutch at it blindly. It veered hard to the left, and then to the right, and then shot forward, as straight as an arrow, directly towards a large oak tree. Draco jerked hard at the broom, but it would not be budged from its course. He thundered towards the tree as inexorably as the Hogwarts Express. He threw his arms up, and something hit him hard, not from the front, but from the side, knocking him decidedly off his broom. The same something tangled in his cloak, and then he was falling, which felt almost like flying. It was far more terrifying. It only lasted a moment, though. He hit soft-packed snow, and the impact knocked the wind out of him. He choked and rolled over, spitting snow, blinded by it. There was a sharp, stinging pain in his arm. "Hey, Malfoy." It was Harry, of course. Draco sat up, pushing wet hair out of his eyes. Harry was kneeling on the snow next to him. His glasses were frosted with it. So were his clothes. "Sorry about knocking you off your broom, but you were going to hit the tree. Why didn't you steer away from it?" "I'm fine, thanks for asking," Draco said through his teeth. "Potter, where are the broomsticks?" Harry waved grandiosely in the direction of the oak tree that they had narrowly avoided smacking into, and almost overbalanced. "They weren't as lucky as we were." A feeling of foreboding in his heart, Draco got shakily to his feet and looked where Harry had indicated. At first, he didn't see what Harry meant. Then, craning his neck back, he saw both broomsticks, high above their heads. The force of the impact had driven them into the tree. They looked like two oversized arrows that had been fired willy-nilly through the branches and into the tree's trunk. "Those broomsticks must be made of something really tough," Harry observed, with desultory interest. "You think that they would have shattered, really?" "You mean like our skulls would have if we'd hit that tree?" Draco said coldly. "But we didn't hit the tree," Harry pointed out breezily. "No thanks to you, you daft bloody git!" Draco exploded. "Let's just ride these broomsticks, shall we? Never mind that one of them had an anti-theft charm on it." "I didn't know that," Harry said, surprised. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't have time, did I? You just jumped on that broomstick and took off. You didn't have to come after me. I always have to come after you." "Great Merlin, what's all this yelling?" said a voice. and Draco whirled around to see Sirius standing just behind him, Lupin at his side. Several other figures were standing on the path back where the carriages were. Draco couldn't see who they were, but knew that they were staring. His heart sank as he stared up at Sirius, who looked absolutely furious. Draco had never really seen his stepfather to be angry before. He seemed to loom over them, his eyes black with anger. "What on earth have you been doing?" he demanded coldly. Lupin cleared his throat. He said, "Sirius?" Sirius turned to look at his friend. "Yes?" In answer, Lupin pointed upward. Sirius turned to follow his gesture, and gaped up at the 2 broomsticks embedded in the tree. "I see," he said slowly, his voice flat. "And whose brilliant idea was it to fly 2 unknown broomsticks?" Draco turned to Harry for some assistance, but immediately realized that there would be no help from this corner. Harry had his hand over his mouth and appeared to be laughing. Sirius blinked at his godson. "Harry, what on earth is wrong with you?" Harry just giggled in response. "He's fine," Draco said in a small voice. "He's just been drinking, and I put a cheering charm on him earlier." "A cheering charm?" Sirius echoed. "Draco, you of all people should know better than to mix cheering charms and alcohol. It causes hysteria, sudden mood swings, and also—"
"I don't feel at all well,"
said Harry gloomily from the snow.
"Also nausea,"
Sirius finished. Draco sighed. "Will he be all right?" "He just needs to sleep it off, is all," Sirius said, bent down and helped Harry to his feet. Harry swayed slightly, and Sirius's expression softened. He bent down to lift Harry up into his arms, as if he were still a child who weighed next to nothing. Sirius straightened up, cradling Harry, then looked up and over at Lupin, who said something so softly that Draco didn't hear it. Then both of them turned and began to walk back towards the lights of Malfoy Park. Draco began to follow everyone else. He wanted to be alone to think for a bit, but alas, it was not to be. No sooner had he reached the door of the inn than Snape stepped out of the shadows and accosted him. "Mr. Malfoy," he said, "a word with you." Draco gazed dispiritedly at his grim-faced potions professor. "I don't suppose that if I said no, you would listen?" he asked hopefully. In answer, Snape narrowed his eyes and raised a black-gloved hand. "What is that?" he asked coolly. Draco looked where Snape was pointing, and felt a shock like a punch at his heart. The right sleeve of his shirt, where his cloak had fallen, glittered with threads of silver that seemed to glow in the moonlight. He pulled his cloak closer, but it was too late. Snape had seen. "Let me see your arm," Snape said. Draco didn't move. "It's not what it— Let me see your arm, Mr. Malfoy," Snape barked, and Draco jumped. "We may not be at Hogwarts, but I still consider you a part of my house, and therefore my responsibility." With a rebellious glare, Draco stepped forward and threw his cloak back over his left shoulder and held his arm out towards the potions master, who took hold of it, much more gently than his fierce expression might lead one to believe, and peeled back the sleeve of Draco's sweater. His immediate intake of breath was loudly audible in the still air, and reluctantly, Draco glanced down and saw what Snape was looking at. A long, shallow gash ran along his forearm, where he had thrown up his arm to shield his face. The gash itself didn't look serious. However, the blood leaking from the wound was dark silver, the color of mercury. "How long has this been going on?" Snape demanded finally. Draco shrugged. "I don't know." "Is this the first you've seen of this?" Snape pressed, studying Draco's face with unblinking intensity. "You don't seem surprised." Draco tried to hold his professor's gaze, and failed. "What? The blood thing? Well, I can explain that." "Really?" Snape cocked an eyebrow. Draco fidgeted. Yes. Overdosed on jelly glowworms, got sozzled and ate a pack of fairy lights, tried to practice one of those charms on yourself that assures you'll light up a room with your smile, but got one of the incantations dreadfully wrong. Explain yourself, Mr. Malfoy, and truthfully, it is cold, and I would like to go back inside." "Look, I don't know what it is," Draco muttered. "I meant to see a meta-wizard. It's just—" "What do you mean, meant to?" "I mean, I made an appointment, then didn't go, actually." "I rather thought so." Snape dropped Draco's arm, and out of nowhere produced a white handkerchief. He handed it to Draco. "Bind this around your cut," he instructed. "From the looks of it, I'd say you were suffering the effects of a serious dark curse or hex." Draco suddenly felt very tired. "Hermione has been looking into it, and it's not a curse or a hex. If it is, then it's not one that she's been able to detect. And you know I'm not ignorant where dark magic is concerned. I don't know what it is." "I shall be speaking to your mother about this immediately." Snape spoke bluntly. "No!" Draco bolted upright in alarm. "No, don't do that." "It is out of your hands, Mr. Malfoy. Were we at school, I would speak to Dumbledore." "The wedding is tomorrow," Draco said desperately. "Can't it wait?" "I cannot help but feel that with some unknown magic affecting your health, it would be irresponsible of me not to—" "Please," Draco said. "It would ruin the wedding. My mother would panic. And for what? To find out that there's something terribly wrong with me. Thanks, but no thanks." Snape looked hesitant. "Does anyone else know about this? Does Potter?" "He knows a little. And Hermione, like I said." "Oh, indeed," Snape said acidly. "You're well taken care of, then, aren't you?" "Please," Draco said again. He could think of no elegant argument, and no grounds on which he could logically appeal to Snape, and knew the professor was probably right. His mother should know. It was just that Draco hated the idea. Once everyone knew, it would become real, something with which he would have to cope. And there would be meta-wizards and infirmaries and people panicking, and none of it would help. Of that he was sure, and he wouldn't be any use to Harry after that. "Very well," Snape said unexpectedly. Draco blinked at him. "Pardon?" "I said, very well. We will wait until after the wedding. It will give me a chance to run some tests on your blood." Snape removed the handkerchief from Draco's arm, folded it, and slipped it into his pocket. Draco watched with wide eyes. "I'm hardly a meta-wizard, but I can certainly detect if a potion has been used on you." There was a long pause. "Thanks," Draco said finally. Snape's coal-black eyes glittered. "Do not thank me. It is unnecessary. I will return to my laboratory and run some tests. It will give me an excuse to miss the reception." Draco found himself almost smiling. "Glad I could help out. In any case, you should return to the house. Do you have enough strength to apparate back?" Draco shook his head. "I'll take a carriage. It's fine. Thanks again." For a moment, Snape seemed to hesitate, and Draco had the thought that the professor might pat him on the shoulder. But the moment passed, and the thought with it. Snape nodded briefly, and apparated away, leaving Draco standing in the snow under the inn's lantern, lost
and thought. It was getting on to morning, and Pansy's party was showing no signs of stopping. Blaise was wandering listlessly through the cavernous solarium. Most of the students were gathered around the gigantic silver vats of Dementor's Kiss, the most powerful cocktail in wizarding creation. It was a turquoise-orange color and smoked. Blaise thought it smelled like mountain troll and tasted worse. Malcolm Baddock detached himself from the rest of the crowd and began to make his way towards her, shooting seductive glances from beneath lowered eyelashes. Blaise fought down an exasperated sigh. Any interest she had ever had in Malcolm had evaporated when she realized that her liaison with him was not annoying Draco the way she had hoped it would. "Blaise, darling," he said, and handed her a glass of smoking turquoise fluid. "Pansy was looking for you." "Was she?" Blaise took the glass, but did not attempt to drink the contents. "Did she say what she wanted?" Malcolm shrugged. "No. I think she got distracted when Crab and Goyle started pole dancing round the pillars." Blaise had already noticed this. It was not an attractive sight. "Well, where is she now?" she asked, and surreptitiously poured her drink into the pot of a nearby fern. It promptly curled up and died. "No idea," said Malcolm. "Say, Blaise, I was thinking that maybe you and I could go somewhere and—" But at that moment, Adrian Pusey turned into a badger. The other students shoved him into a pink silk pillowcase, where he reverted to his normal shape. The pillowcase bulged and ripped. Bits of pink silk flew everywhere. Adrian staggered to his feet and was sick into a punch bowl. "This party is awful," said Blaise. "You're just upset that Malfoy didn't show," said Malcolm, a sudden razor edge to his voice. He lowered his dark eyes and glanced meditatively at his drink as he sipped it. "Malfoy?" Blaise echoed. "Last week you were calling him Draco." "That was before I knew he was a smarmy Gryffindor lover." Malcolm's nostrils flared. "Apparently he's as cowardly as he is arrogant. I'm not surprised he didn't come tonight. He knows he'll be up against the wall with the other traitors soon enough." "Malcolm, you know as well as I do that he has his own party to be at tonight," said Blaise. Malcolm looked as if he had no idea how to respond to this. "He could have ditched," he insisted. "Slytherins are very good at ditching." "Right," said Blaise. "Look, I'm off to find Pansy. Have a nice evening. Oh, and if you're really lonely, you can go knock Millicent's coconuts together in the bathroom." "What?" "Have a nice night, Malcolm," said Blaise, and sashayed away. Later, she was to be found taking herself on something of a leisurely tour of the Parkinson estate, before she finally discovered Pansy, dancing on top of a long oak table in the solarium. She had her hands up over her head and was moving slow and drunkenly. Her green dress robes had slipped down over her shoulders, and Blaise could see that her girlish, over-the-knee stockings had begun to roll down from the tops. Blaise stood next to the table and cleared her throat, loudly. Pansy, however, appeared not to notice, and she felt what she always felt around Pansy these days. Pity, mixed with exasperation and suspicion. "Pansy," she said, then more loudly, "Pansy!" She heard a chuckle at her elbow. It was Terence Higgs. She looked at him narrowly. Attracted to his sandy hair and big dark eyes, she had dated Terence briefly in 5th year, before she had come to the weary realization that he was like most Quidditch players, far more interested in bludgers, quaffles, and squashing the Gryffindor team than he was in anything else. "Not sure you'll have any luck talking to Pansy," he remarked conversationally. "She's had 5 Dementor's kisses already." "Ugh," Blaise said. "Terence, help me up." Terence helped himself to a generous feel of her thigh as he assisted her up onto the table. Blaise led him. A favor for a favor, after all. She got her footing, stepped away, and winked down at him. "Go talk to Greg and Marcus, there's a dear," she said to him, in that tone of voice that promised without promising. As she smiled down at Terence, it was Draco she saw suddenly in her mind's eye. The beginning of term, standing in the sunshine outside the Quidditch changing rooms before the first game, waiting for her to come out. And when she did, he'd held his arms out to her, his leather wrist guards hanging loose and open. She'd stared at him because he was so beautiful. All that pale hair fired with sunlight, gray eyes bright as shards of glass against the lightly tanned skin. He was so removed behind that glass wall that she could not penetrate, and she suspected that was why she wanted him so much. Thinking about him now made her skin prickle, and she turned away from Terence and walked across the table to Pansy, her high heels clicking on the polished wood surface. Reaching the other girl, she tapped her on the shoulder. "Pansy, you wanted to see—" Pansy swung around drunkenly, saw Blaise, and nearly collapsed against her. Blaise struggled to stay upright, with Pansy clinging to her like a limpet.
"Blaise, darling, dance with me,"
Pansy slurred, her little fox paw hand seizing onto Blaise's waist and pulling her close. She smelled of alcohol, like an overheated dish of brandy. "Pansy, you're drunk." Pansy frowned.
"And you're no fun."
"Because I don't want to engage in a table dancing act of a bunch of gaping plebs." She jerked on Pansy's arm. "Come on, I want to talk to you. Preferably before you ask Goyle to dance, and I have to beat him off with a stick."
"I would never ask Goyle to dance with me,"
Pansy hiccuped.
"Higgs is much more fanciful."
"They're both revolting, and if you could tell them apart in your state, I'd be shocked. Come along, Pansy. Don't make me drag you." It once again required the assistance of Terence to manhandle Pansy down off the table and set her on her feet. Blaise hopped down after her, not in the mood for more of Terence's pawings. Ignoring his leer, she pushed Pansy ahead of her, past Crabbe and Goyle, down the hall, and into a small side bedroom. Closing the door behind them, Blaise took out her wand and pointed it at Pansy. "Sobriety." Pansy collapsed backwards onto the bed, as if Pansy had pushed her, and covered her face with her hands. Blaise slid her wand back into the top of her stocking and crossed her arms. "Sit up, Pansy." Pansy sat up slowly. She was rumpled, her lipstick smeared, her hair in unsightly snarls. She was also stone-cold sober. "You cow," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "Oh, but I think I did. I needed to talk to you, and that wasn't going to happen while you were determined to show your knickers to the entire Slytherin horde. You must be rather lonely." "It needn't concern you," Pansy said flatly. "Oh, really?" Blaise curved her lips into a smile. "Tell me, why would Draco feel compelled to go through your things? What exactly were you hiding in there?" Pansy's head shot up, and she blanched under her makeup. "Draco did... Why, how could he? And there is something else I remember," Blaise continued, as Pansy faltered for words. "Once you asked me for one of my extra barrettes, and were really hacked off when I wouldn't give it to you. But you know the structures against giving out our protections to those outside the circle. I'm guessing you made one of your own. Does your mystery person even know what it was you gave them?" Pansy's lips twitched. She looked as if she were about to break into one of those vindictive sobbing fits she was so prone to. But Blaise took almost no notice. Her mind was ticking back, bits and pieces of half-forgotten events clicking into place like bits of a puzzle fitting together. She remembered Neville Longbottom trying to enlist the help of the school prefects to find his missing toad. Remembered sitting by Malcolm's bed in the hospital wing as he tried to recollect the last thing he had seen before he'd been knocked out. Remembered him telling her he'd been on his way to the prefect's meeting room. "Bloody hell, Pansy," she said. "I can't believe you'd do that. Did you kill it yourself? How did you get rid of it?" Pansy's lips curled back over her small, pointed teeth. "Shut up, Blaze," she hissed. "You don't know anything." "I know enough!" Blaze snapped at Pansy furiously. "And so do I!" Pansy was on her feet, her small hands gripped into fists at her side. "I notice it didn't take you long to figure out that Draco never cared about you," she hissed. "Your darling Draco, a traitorous, mudblood-loving rat. Mock me all you want. At least I have Ron. At least he wanted to be with me." "Ron Weasley!" Blaze shouted, incensed. "That's who you would go to such lengths to protect?" Pansy clapped a hand over her mouth, a look of utter shock on her face, knowing she had said too much. For several seconds there was absolute silence. Then Pansy spoke again, and this time her voice was small and thready. "It's too late now," she said absently. "There's nothing you can do to protect Draco. He'll die unless he gets what he needs, and there's nothing you can do about it." Blaze looked at her. "What do you mean?" In a deathly quiet tone. "Is something going to happen to Draco?" Pansy raised her damp face. Her small mouth was set in a hard little line. "Don't you get it?" she said. "It's already happened." Blaze stared at her. "You can't help him," Pansy said, and with that, she pushed past Blaze and stalked out of the room, slamming the door hard behind her. Draco woke early the next morning, after passing a restless night, to find an eagle owl bearing a rolled-up letter, tapping on the window with its beak. He threw the window open, letting in great bursts of cold air, and took the parchment from the bird. Propping his elbows on the windowsill, he read aloud to himself. "Draco, Albus asked me to send along a word of reassurance. He wanted me to let you know that all the plans are in place for tonight, and we have everything under control. The constant vigilance synchronized aura auto-response team will be at your disposal in case of any unexpected or unwanted guests who make it past our warding system. Enjoy today. Try not to worry. I look forward to the wedding itself and will be sure to wear my festive leg. Yours, Alistair Moody." "Mad as a brush," Draco announced, and tossed the parchment onto his bed. Still, he did feel somewhat reassured, although a small knot of nervousness did form in his stomach when he thought about the wedding. It was likely to be somewhat socially awkward, and on top of that, the sound of wheels on snow interrupted his thoughts. He glanced down to see a carriage pulling up at the base of the enormous stone staircase that fronted the manor. It was one of the hired carriages from the village that had brought them to the cold Christmas Inn the night before, and would be bringing all the guests to the house today. The carriages were black, with the Malfoy Park emblem on them, a wand crossed with a dagger on a silver field. Draco had already watched several guests arrive, including Pansy Parkinson, a thought that made him feel slightly disquieted. The carriage pulled to a halt, the doors opened, and the occupants began to pile out. A witch and a wizard in dark blue cloaks with the hoods pulled up exited first. Then a tall wizard whose hood was down, his red hair bright and unmistakable in the winter sunshine. Charlie Weasley. He turned and held out a hand to help his sister down next. Draco couldn't see her clearly, just her familiar yellow cloak and the scarlet curls like a river of bright fire down her back. And after her, moving slowly and reluctantly, came Ron. Draco stared at him for a moment, then pulled back from the window and stood still, lost in thought. He'd wondered if Weasley would actually show up, had suspected he would, but had not been entirely sure. Now that he was here, Draco found his tiredness falling away, and a faint anticipatory sensation taking its place. He smiled, then went to the wardrobe and began to get dressed. It was so dark when Harry finally opened his eyes the next day that he thought it was still the middle of the night. But soon he realized that the curtains had been drawn firmly closed around his bed. He blinked and sat up slowly, wincing, and fumbled for his glasses. He slid them on, his head pounding, then realized that it wasn't just his head, but rather the door. He snapped out of his befuddled state instantly as he heard a familiar voice behind it, quite loud and spectral.
"Mr. Potter,"
said Anton, the ghost butler.
"Master Black has sent me to wake you up."
Feeling like his head weighed about a ton, Harry got to his feet, wrapping a sheet around himself, and staggered to the door. He opened it a bare crack to see the ghost butler, hovering just in front of him, looking severe.
"Mr. Potter," he said, "Mr. Black also instructed me to bring you your clothes."
"Oh, yes, thank you, Anton. I'll take those," Harry said, and retrieved the pile of clothes from the ghost, and moved to shut the door, but Anton stopped him.
"One more thing, sir,"
the butler said. Harry hesitated miserably. "What?"
"Mr. Malfoy also tasked me with passing along a message for him. I believe it was, 'Get downstairs now, you big oversleeping git.'"
"Thank you, Anton," Harry replied mechanically, and shut the door. Harry dressed quickly, then gazed bleakly at his reflection in the mirror. He felt like the equivalent of a severed head on a pole, but he looked all right, mostly due to the clothes he was wearing, which were expensive and very well cut. They took away from the fact that he was deathly pale, with black shadows under his eyes. He began to see why Draco was so attached to clothes. They made you feel that at least you looked all right, even if you felt like hell. What did I even get up to last night? He wondered, looking glumly at himself in the mirror. He needed to talk to Draco about what had happened, as he couldn't remember anything after they went outside. He hoped he hadn't made a complete idiot of himself, or he had no idea how he'd face the party otherwise. Thank God Hermione wouldn't be here until the wedding proper, and didn't have to see him looking this way. It was nearly killing him just to think about it. He turned away from his white-faced reflection in the mirror, grabbed for his cloak, and hurried out the door. Hermione was not in good spirits when she arrived at the library early that morning. She had slept badly the night before, very badly. Her room with the leaky cauldron had seemed too hot, and she'd been plagued with awful nightmares of a weight pressing down on her, cutting off her breath. She'd awoken at dawn with the sound of Pansy's voice shouting "Mudblood" at her, and had been unable to get back to sleep. All in all, a bad evening. On top of that, she had had to wait in a longish line before she reached the bookworms and passed the time by fretting about the upcoming wedding. The thought of seeing Harry was like a black wall of dread rising in front of her. He would mope around the party looking depressed and handsome, and she would want to drown him in a bowl of fruit punch. Or, even worse, he would have gotten over her completely and would be at the peak of high spirits. One of Fleur's fabulous Vila cousins would be draped all over his lap, feeding him peeled grapes with a pair of solid gold tongs, and she would still want to drown him in a bowl of fruit punch. "Peeled grapes," she said in a deathly voice to the bookworm when she reached the head of the line. "Honestly, who eats peeled grapes? How lazy is that?" The bookworm waved its antenna in a worried manner. Hermione sighed. "Never mind," she said. "I'm Hermione Granger. Reference number 97356. You were cross-referencing for me?" The worms scurried away, and soon a trolley rolled down the aisle, piled with several books. Hermione took them and retreated to her now familiar corner under the portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw. Most of the books were ones she had already looked at. Several seemed to be general weaponry guides. She began flipping through them dispiritedly. There were chapters on living blades, knives that cut stone, shillelaghs, and maces and daggers, and... Hermione paused, and flipped back several pages to a full-page illustration of a bow and arrow. The bow had a unicorn bone handle with a sturdy silver string, and the box of text underneath it was slightly blurred with age. The Angkor Vandal bow, only one known to exist on display in the Stonehenge Museum of Wizardry. The last time this bow was used was during the 11th century, when Tobias Banswich used it to assassinate Stephen Peerage, a prominent member of the Wizarding Council, which predates our Ministry of Magic. It was rumored that the arrow that killed Peerage had been laced with a mysterious poison, which caused the wound to glow phosphorescent. What followed is reported to be a terrible series of side effects, caused by the poison which culminated in Peerage's painful and excruciating death. Details are listed below. Hermione stared at the words on the page, fear making her heart beat even faster. A mysterious poison? One that ended in a painful and excruciating death? She thought of Draco, and how listless he had been looking as of late, and her stomach churned. She bolted to her feet, almost knocking over her chair, and began to cram her books haphazardly back into her bag. Draco was lurking. He never thought of himself as much of a lurker. He liked the spotlight too much. But there was no other word for it. He was lurking. In a disused hallway, no less, lit only by a single torch. He was waiting for Pansy Parkinson. He was tired, and had slept poorly the night before, and suspected his hair looked bad. But time, tide, and revenge waited for no man, and he'd stood on the upper balcony until he'd seen Pansy in her green dress robes walking up the manor staircase with her parents. Then he'd headed back inside. He needed to detach her from her family, so he'd sent a house elf along with a message for Pansy that an urgent note was waiting for her in the green room. The instructions would lead her to this hallway, and then leave her there. It seemed like an hour, although it was probably more like 15 minutes, before he heard someone walking towards him along the corridor. This someone was walking fast, and was obviously wearing heels. Draco smiled to himself. It was time. He waited until she was almost upon him, then stepped out of the shadows and swung around to face her. It was as rewarding as he could have hoped. She shrieked and almost staggered backward. "Hello, Pansy darling," he said. "Nice to see you here." "Draco!" Pansy gasped, her hand over her heart. "Why would you scare me like that? I mean, really." "Where were you off to?" he asked, with unabashed glee. She lowered her hand and glared at him. "There was an urgent message for me." "I know," he interjected. "Only the message doesn't exist. I made it up. I wanted to get you alone so I could talk to you." Pansy was the picture of outraged respectability. "You what?" He began to circle slowly around her, and could feel her resisting the urge to turn around and look at him. "You've been very busy lately, haven't you?" Draco spoke softly, but there was a menace in his tone that made Pansy look round sharply. "What do you mean by that?" "I think you know." Draco was looming over her now. Her curls trembled just above the round collar of her ill-fitting dress robes. "You know, Pansy, the point of social climbing is to make your way up the social ladder, not slither down it. Although I've heard you're talented in that area too." "In what area?" He leaned close, so that his whisper stirred her hair. "Going down," he said. It took Pansy a moment to react to Draco's appalling remark. Then she jerked and whirled around. "You're disgusting. I don't know why you'd say a thing like that, but—" "Don't you?" His voice was suddenly sharp, and she winced as if he had cut her. "Well, maybe I could jolt your memory with a little recitation. You don't mind if I read out loud, do you?" He cleared his throat ostentatiously, and drew a folded parchment from his pocket.
This is a little something I like to call Sonnets from the Tragically Deluded. I think you'll like it. He snapped the parchment open with a flick of the wrist and read out loud. Hermione, I'm sitting here looking at you from across the room in potions class, but you can't see me. You're looking straight ahead. I can see your hand moving over your parchment as you take notes. Maybe you're writing to me, as I'm writing to you. I'm not good at this letter writing business. Harry would be better. Hell, Malfoy would be better. But I'm writing to you because I have to. Because it hurts to be this far away from you, especially after... Stop it, Pansy whispered. But why? Draco smiled at her, but she didn't seem to notice. Don't worry, he continued, reading from the letter's end. I will leave this for you in our usual hiding place. I'm sorry about what I said last night, about us coming clean and telling everyone. You were right. And even if you weren't, it doesn't matter. We're so beyond all the arguing we used to do. When I see the way you look at me, I feel... Stop it! Pansy shrieked, and Draco knew he had hit pay dirt. Her voice was raw and uncontrolled, her eyes rounded into huge ovals. Give me that! Give it to me! She wrenched the note out of his grasp and tore it into shreds, which she scattered over the floor with a triumphant air. Draco laughed. There's 30 more where that came from. Weasley seems to have been an astonishingly dedicated correspondent. She was staring at him. Blaise didn't lie to me then. You did go through my things. Blaise? Draco returned, raising his eyebrows. Well, I suppose it was only a matter of time before she started asking questions. She looked dazed. What are you going to do? What are you afraid of? Draco asked in a voice like poisoned sugar. That I'll go and I'll tell Weasley, or Harry, or possibly both. Or perhaps that I will go to your parents and tell them everything you've been up to lately. Surprisingly, some of the color came back to her face. Maybe you should try telling them something they don't know. It was his turn to stare. Don't tell me you confessed to them in a fit of tormented guilt. It was their idea, Draco, Pansy said flatly, having recovered some of her self-possession. My father's the one who developed the glamour charms. Draco struggled to put the disgust he was feeling into words. You expect me to believe that they think it was a good idea to whore out their only daughter? I don't... He paused and fell silent, as things in his mind fell into place. No, they wouldn't do that. They'd support you disguising yourself as Hermione to get information, to spy. But sleeping with Weasley, that was your idea. You fell in love with him, didn't you? Oh, that must have hurt your pride. Pansy's head snapped back. Her eyes were very bright. It was what? His tone was cruel, but cruelty seemed to be what she was expecting. It was the way he looked at me, she whispered. Nobody's ever looked at me like that. He wasn't looking at you. It was never you. And you don't know what it's like, I suppose? Her tone was suddenly spiked with venom. For a moment, he was speechless. He had no idea how much she knew, but the uncontrollable memory of Hermione putting her arms around him in the wardrobe rose up in his mind, of her voice calling him Harry, and for just that moment, an arrow thrust of sympathy for Pansy went through him, and he felt pity for her. Blaise always said you were a true Slytherin in your heart, Pansy said, breaking his reverie. But I don't believe that. You picked the losing side, Draco Malfoy. I know things you don't. We all do. None of us trust you anymore. We keep you out of our plans, but that doesn't mean we don't have to... Pansy, Draco interrupted. Shut up. She compressed her lips into a thin line. Fine. Stick your head in the sand. But you'll think about what I said later. I know you will, Pansy.
he remarked kindly. "I didn't think about what you said while you were saying it. Now come on." He took hold of her arm, and she didn't pull away, seeming to have gone beyond panic and tumbling into a cold, trapped fury. "We're going back to the party." Harry badly wanted a glass of wine, but had forbidden himself to have one. After the events of the previous night, he never wanted to drink again. What he really wanted, in his heart of hearts, was to go back to bed and never get up. Failing that, he wanted to talk to Draco. But Draco seemed to be missing. He was nowhere in the greater hall, and when Harry reached out to try to find his mind, he felt only a faint buzz in the distance, like an interrupted radio signal. Draco was obviously busy.
"Oh, Harry, lovely to see you. Don't you look handsome?"
It was Mrs. Weasley, leaning up to kiss his cheek, smooth down his hair, and admire his new clothes. Harry made small talk with her without really looking in her direction. She looked too much like Ron. It was painful. He could see Ron in the mirror that hung over the long table covered with plates of food. He was hanging back against the far wall with the rest of his brothers.
"All black seems a little depressing for a wedding,"
Mrs. Weasley was saying, and this time Harry looked at her. But before he could reply, he saw a flicker of movement out of the corner of his eye. The double doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Draco came through them. He wasn't alone either. He was holding Pansy Parkinson by the elbow, and was fairly certain it wasn't to escort her in. "Excuse me," Harry said to Mrs. Weasley. I have to go over there." And he beat a hasty retreat, leaving her looking after him in surprise. Draco was standing just inside the door with Pansy, his eyes roving over the room. As Harry drew closer to them, he noticed that Draco seemed to be less steering Pansy by the arm than gripping her tightly against her will. She was pulling away now, a look of obvious distress on her pale, fox-like face. As Harry approached, Draco looked up, and his face cleared. "Ah, Potter, glad you're here." "Where have you been?" Harry said under his breath, aware that a significant portion of the room's occupants were looking at them. Draco looked at him, obviously frazzled. "I went spearfishing in Bulgaria. Anyway, Potter, hang around for a minute, will you? You want to be here for this." His eyes went past Harry, scanning the room again. Harry blinked. "Malfoy, what?" But Draco wasn't listening. Instead, he began to walk across the room, pulling Pansy with him. Harry fell into step beside him, feeling that something very strange was going on. "Could you maybe find some other time to do whatever it is you're doing?" he demanded. Draco shot him a look, then turned to where the Weasley boys were clustered around a table. "Oi! Ron! Over here!" he shouted unexpectedly, pitching his voice very loud. Most of the room turned around and stared, and all the Weasleys, who were grouped around the punch bowl, turned as well. Ron, arrested mid-motion with a glass of pumpkin juice halfway to his lips, stared. Draco reached out his free hand and made a beckoning motion. Ron's eyes went to Harry. Harry stared him down, challenging him to look away. With a nervous glance at his brothers, Ron set his glass down on the table and began to make his way across the room towards Draco and his two companions. Pansy, a stricken look on her face, began trying to get away. Draco only held on tighter. Harry could see that his fingers were digging hard into her upper arms. It must have hurt her badly. Honestly, what did Draco think he was doing? The world seemed to narrow down to a single path of motion as Ron walked towards them. Heads turned as he walked. People were staring, with half-fascinated expressions of those watching a scene take place. Ron stopped in front of Draco, and Harry could see violent shadows under his friend's eyes. They stirred no compassion in him. His rage consumed anything he might have felt and left him speechless. "What's this about, then?" Ron asked softly, looking not at Harry, but at Draco. "If you wanted my attention, Malfoy—" "If I wanted your attention,
I'd dress up like Hermione and try to shag you in a broom closet, Draco said, with a smile like the edge of a knife. Ron colored slightly, but didn't move. Say whatever you want, Malfoy, he said, but don't ruin this wedding. I'm asking you. It's not the wedding yet, Draco said, the same wicked smile never leaving his face. At that, Harry looked past his friend and saw that Sirius was coming towards them. Behind him, Lupin stood frozen. Everyone was still staring. He felt himself shrink under their gazes. Knew Ron must be curdled with humiliation beside him, but Draco was at his best when everyone was watching, and he alone among them looked as if he was enjoying himself. This wedding, Draco went on smoothly, is meant for family and close friends of the family. You, I think, are neither. Leave him alone! It was Pansy, speaking for the first time, her voice trembling with emotion. And Harry knew, in that moment, he knew. She had started away from Draco, who still held her arm tightly from behind, and her eyes were on Ron's face. Like you've never done anything wrong, she cried, and broke off, as if she realized she had said too much. Harry could see by the dawning look of horror on Ron's face that he, too, was beginning to understand. But it was Draco who acted and pushed her, suddenly and violently, towards Ron, who, being Ron, caught her instead of letting her fall. She stumbled and clutched at him, and Draco laughed. That's right, Weasley, he said. Cop a decent grab, would you? See if you feel anything familiar. You should. Whatever glamour spells she used, I think she'd still feel the same. And you ought to know that body pretty well. So many nights together in the prefect's room. With a guttural exclamation of horror, Ron pushed Pansy away and wrapped his arms around himself, shaking. Draco made no move to recapture Pansy, and she made no move to run away. Just threw her hands up over her face and burst into loud, spasmodic sobbing. Now you know, Draco said to Ron. I hope she was worth it. Harry was conscious that there was movement all around them. Sirius hurrying towards them, the Parkinsons running towards their crying daughter, and the whole room bursting into whispers. But he saw, as if lit by a single spotlight, only the narrow circle that held himself and Ron, Pansy, and Draco. Pansy weeping, Ron shocked and silent, and Draco looking like nothing on earth. He looked like drawings Harry had seen in his childhood of avenging angels. He turned away, unwilling to watch any more, but unable to find the courage to stop it. Draco was silent, and into that silence Pansy's sobbing rose to a shriek that could have shattered glass. Harry stared at her and at Ron, and a sick feeling began to spread through his stomach. He raised his eyes and met Draco's gaze over Pansy's head, and he didn't know what he would have done or asked Draco to do after that, and never got the chance to know, because at that moment the double doors to the hall opened, and Lucius Malfoy came walking in. Greetings, everyone, he said. How kind of you all to come to my homecoming party.
Quotes. A one-legged man at a butt-kicking contest is from MASH. And yes, I added that one. I don't think Cassandra's ever watched MASH, or if she did, I don't think she liked it. But it's a good show. You should watch it. I don't care that it's old. And that is all for this chapter, guys. More explanations of things that I cut out, because this was another chapter where I had to basically rearrange everything. So, the bits about Hermione in the library, she didn't really find much of anything in there, you know? Like, she did find the stuff, I think, about the poison, kinda, but not really. So I took it from the earlier thing where they went to the Stonehenge Museum and, you know, basically performed a heist. So stupid. But yeah, I took that part out and I'm just like, you know, Hermione's in the library. Why wouldn't she find anything?
That's just ridiculous. Why have her go at all if it's not going to do anything? And then the other thing that I actually took out was, there's this really kind of yucky scene where Rhys rapes Harry, for a lack of a better term. And the reason that I'm putting it like that is because Harry is extremely drunk, and Rhys kind of shows up in his bedroom while he is half passed out, and she glamours herself to look like Hermione, and it is implied that they have extremely rough sex. And then she's talking to him in the morning like, oh, hey, like, that was really great last night. Wouldn't have known you were a virgin. By the way, you stuck it to me. And I'm like, first of all, this is just disgusting, Cassandra, because, like, he's incoherent. Like, it works both ways. Like, a passed out girl getting molested by a guy, it's no different than a passed out guy being molested by a girl. It translates the same. So could we not? And also, Harry is 17 years old and Rhys is thousands of years old. Yucky age gap stuff. And again, I know that 17 is considered an adult by the UK standards, but it's still not okay. Like, it's just not okay. And in the States, that is still a child. So, and it can even be argued. I saw someone on TikTok say the other day that the, legal age of consent should be moved to 21, and I absolutely agree. It just, bleh, it's so gross. And I do believe that is most of the changes I did, although, oh no, there was another one. The other one that I ended up doing was Pansy had a New Year's Eve party instead of a Christmas party, and it was later on in the book, and it just didn't make any sense to have it later. Like, why have it later? It should be going on while, Sirius is having his stag night. Like, why wouldn't you do that? It just doesn't make any sense. But I fixed it. Anyway, guys, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you are interested in supporting me monetarily, I have a Ko-fi and a Patreon linked here on my About section. And this month I actually released a Patreon video here, so you can kind of see what I do over there. I released it on the 15th. So if you want to check that out here on YouTube, you absolutely can. I'll be sticking it behind a paywall at the end of the month, as long as I remember. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you all in the next one. Good night.